Okay, good morning, everyone, or it's almost time to say good afternoon. It is a great privilege and honor for me to be here speaking at this 9th Global 5G event. And I'd like to thank 5GMF for creating this forum for all of us to get together. So my name is Manish TRIPATHI. I'm the Vice President of Engineering at Qualcomm and the Global Head for Engineering Services Group. And my team basically works with operators across the globe in helping with deployment issues around 3G, 4G, and 5G technologies. So in the brief 10 minutes I have with you today, my intent was to share some of our perspectives on how we see 5G commercialization going, what are some of the trends we see coming ahead, and some of the technology areas developing as well. So I think at the start of the session, Chris had some very interesting statistics on where 5G is from a global deployment perspective. And in fact, I noticed that some of his numbers are actually ahead of this, so he's got more updated numbers. So I think since the early 5G networks launched back in 2019, we have seen an unprecedented interest and growth of 5G networks across the globe. So since then, today, we already have more than 275 operators that have launched 5G commercially, and many more of them are looking at, are at various stages, whether they are acquired spectrum or they're in the process of acquiring spectrum, or they are in the early stages of some of the upgrades and getting the networks ready for 5G. But what has also been very interesting with 5G has been the tremendous amount of interest that has been there from day one from the OEMs to ensure that there were devices, and we're talking flagship devices, not feature phones or lower tier devices that happen to be in the case of 4G, but flagship devices that have been coming out, and we're already seeing second and third generation of these devices out in the market. So what that means is that the customers, of course, have a lot of choice in terms of what they can use on these networks, but it's also allowing a lot of these operators who are still in the early stages of deploying 5G to have the market preceded with a lot of the devices so that when they light up the service, they can immediately see a lot of traffic on the network. Now, 5G as a technology has been built to provide or to work across a variety of spectrum options. And again, we saw some very good examples of the kind of spectrum that is being enabled by various regulatory bodies in different countries. So 5G, of course, works in the traditional low band and the mid band, which is what was also used by 4G. But 5G also introduced the millimeter wave band, which allows a very differentiated level of service to be offered to the customers. So if you look at the low band, it provides us more coverage, of course. We all know that, which means that we can show the 5G icon in more places. But of course, the bandwidth is limited, which means that the peak data rates that we can offer to the customers are lower. And that's where kind of the mid-band fits in the sweet spot, where it, of course, doesn't cover as much as the low band, but operators typically get 100 megahertz in the 3.5 gigahertz. In some cases, it's less. In some cases, it's even more than that. And with that, they can really create a very differentiated 5G experience and offer the next level of services to the customers. And of course, lastly, millimeter wave, given the propagation nature of it, and there was, again, some conversation on that earlier, and we can get to more of that in the Q&A. But it is meant to be deployed in smaller areas where you have a lot of traffic, which could be like your busy streets or city centers or malls or train stations or airports, those kind of environments, and really provide a very differentiated user experience for the people. If you look at globally, 5G millimeter wave, of course, started in the US. That's where we had the first commercial deployments by some of the operators there. But Japan is right there, and we're happy to see the level of progress of millimeter wave deployment here. And not only that, we are seeing a lot of interest and a lot of operators who are at early stages of commercialization in Asia Pac as well. And we see early commercialization in Europe as well. In fact, in Italy, Fastweb is one of the operators that has already launched a fixed wireless or a home broadband service entirely built on a millimeter wave network. Now, of course, the question that always comes with 5G millimeter wave is there a business case given that you're talking cells that only cover 200 meters or maybe 300 meters? Am I really going to see the ROI as an operator? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And we have done a lot of analysis on this topic because this keeps coming up. And in this particular example, Bell Consulting, actually, they did analysis for the UK market, where they looked at the market and said, okay, first of all, where would it make sense to deploy millimeter wave? And which, again, like I was saying, means that areas where you have a lot of traffic, like shopping districts, malls, train stations, airports, and all of those things. Households as well for home broadband service and all that. And then they did the analysis on what will it take to offer millimeter wave service there, and what will be the equivalent investment from a sub-6 network perspective, and how does the business case look like? Now, what is very interesting is with millimeter wave, while there is an upfront CapEx investment that you need to make, but that gives you so much of capacity and performance that the cost per GB equation is heavily tilted towards millimeter wave in terms of what you would see. And in this case, as they concluded, it was about almost 75% better for millimeter wave. So what that means is that with these targeted deployments, operators can get very good ROI and very good annual returns as well. And then the payback period is also quite reasonable. So it looks very promising from that perspective. And then the previous speakers were talking about progress towards standalone mode. So as hopefully everybody knows here, non-standalone mode is how most of the operators started their 5G journey. It allowed them to leverage the existing 4G networks and then use 5G where it was available. And now we are moving towards the standalone mode, which means that now we have to add the 5G core and the network can pretty much work on its own. And I think there were some very good examples, practical examples that were given in the previous presentation. But the reason to go towards standalone is really to be able to look at that next level of services that operators can start offering to the customers. So definitely there's going to be a big case for enterprises where operators could create slices and offer differentiated services to the enterprises. Or online gaming was another example that was there in the previous presentation, where again, an online gamer might be willing to pay an extra incremental dollars on top of what they're paying in the monthly plan to get that differentiated latency so that they have a very good online gaming experience. Similarly, once release 16 features start getting launched next year, then things like precise positioning, ultra-low latency and reliability, edge compute, the NR Lite services for the IoT use case, all of those become realizable as well with the standalone mode. Now, of course, the other thing that the operators can start doing now is that there's capability now in the devices as well as in the networks to use dual connectivity between the sub-6 and the millimeter wave layers. So what that means is that now they can really combine the power of the two networks, and with that, they can deliver unprecedented experience to the user. If you're talking like close to 5 gigabits on the downlink, 1 gigabit on the uplink, so very, very, very high data rates. And this has already been commercialized here in Japan. Docomo just last month announced the commercial launch of this service. We're excited to see that. And there's other operators as well who are looking at similar deployments to harness the power of both sub-6 and the millimeter wave spectrums together. So lastly, while there's a lot of momentum and a lot of things happening from the public networks perspective, the other area that we see poised for growth is 5G private networks. And again, it was very encouraging for me in the morning to see how different regulators are looking at that and making sure that the spectrum is going to be there, and there's a lot of encouragement that is being done to start this space. And that is going to be really good because 5G brings a lot of benefits to enterprises in terms of solving a lot of the problems of ensuring that a consistent and reliable service can be realized by these enterprises, and they can really truly complete their journey towards digital transformation. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and attention.